If you read the headlines out of modern biomedical engineering labs, you would think the future of medicine is entirely microscopic. The focus is overwhelmingly on tissue engineering, custom biopolymers, and targeted nanocarriers racing through the bloodstream to attack disease at the cellular level. But step inside any active trauma center or orthopedic surgical theater, and that microscopic frontier vanishes. The reality of keeping human beings structurally intact looks much more industrial. Across the medical sector, over 70 metals possess absolutely zero biological function, and they do not naturally exist anywhere within human soft tissues or bone. Clinically, their chemical composition can trigger immune system allergies, and their dense atomic structures create massive, blinding artifacts on MRI scans. Because of these inherent drawbacks, a widespread assumption has taken root. The medical community largely expects metals to be entirely phased out as regenerative medicine matures. That complete phase-out will never happen. Metallic implants are not a temporary placeholder in the history of medicine. Their continued dominance is dictated by the absolute physical laws of material science. When a surgeon needs to save a patient's mobility or their life, the brutal mechanical demands of human movement completely overrule the body's biological preferences. When an engineer sits down to design an artificial implant, they have three primary classes of materials to choose from: metals, ceramics, and polymers. For the last 40 years, the medical field has directed massive amounts of research into replacing metallic components with those two options wherever physically possible. You can trace this historical effort straight through the device pipeline. Huge technical innovations in both ceramics and polymers fed directly into medical design. Engineers steadily improved the fracture toughness of ceramics, allowing these hardened materials to safely enter the surgical field. At the same time, the extreme diversification of synthesized polymers allowed laboratories to create flexible materials that closely mimicked human soft tissues. These efforts yielded real successes. Any component of a device that did not strictly need to bear heavy, repetitive physical loads was successfully siphoned off into dedicated ceramic or polymer devices. But we have already hit the physical limit of that substitution. The low-hanging fruit has been entirely replaced. The medical devices that currently rely on metal are the exact ones that have survived decades of rigorous attempts to obsolete them. What remains is an irreducible core of modern medical hardware. If a specific component of an internal implant is made of metal today, it's because that piece must be made of metal simply to survive. To understand why substitution fails here, you have to look at the environment these materials are forced to operate in. The interior of the human body is a highly corrosive, warm, saline bath. It attacks foreign objects relentlessly. But the skeletal structure is also subjected to constant cyclic loading. With every single step, a multiple of your body weight slams through your joints. This chart compares the engineering properties of our material classes. Looking at the middle row, ceramics actually form the basic inorganic building blocks of human bone and teeth. Engineers utilize them for their extreme wear resistance, their ability to withstand heat, and their immense chemical stability in that saline environment. Their engineering failure point is strictly structural. Ceramics have exceedingly low fracture toughness. Subject them to a sudden twisting impact load, and they shatter catastrophically. Polymers sit at the opposite end of the spectrum, forming the organic basis of actual human soft tissue and biomolecules. They offer unmatched engineering flexibility. They are incredibly light, and they can be customized to safely biodegrade over time. Their critical flaw is an inherent lack of absolute tensile strength. They simply can't handle the physical stress required to hold a fractured frame together. That brings us back to metals, whose physical properties are entirely dictated by the unique behavior of metallic chemical bonds. They possess a highly specific, vital pairing, immense fracture toughness combined with elasticity. This animated graph shows how these materials handle physical pressure, mapping mechanical stress against material strain. Under high stress, the ceramic curve stops abruptly. It shatters. The polymer curve stretches far along the strain axis, but can't reach high stress levels. The metal curve scales high up the stress axis and far along the strain axis, absorbing massive amounts of kinetic energy. Engineers call this plastic deformability. It's the ability of a material to bend, warp, and absorb blunt force trauma without snapping. Metals are selected for the operating room not for how elegantly they interact with human cells, but for how stubbornly they refuse to fail under decades of physical trauma. This creates a massive friction point in medical science. Researchers naturally want to develop materials that harmonize seamlessly with native cells. Metallic materials offer absolutely no structural or chemical analog to human anatomy. Because they completely lack biomimicry, they are highly unattractive targets for the bleeding-edge fields of tissue engineering. This graphic maps a material's practical viability directly against the academic desire to research it, revealing a perfect inverse relationship. There is a massive expectation and research demand for polymers, driven by their similarity to human tissue and their vast expandability in drug delivery systems. But the clinical reality paints the opposite picture. Metals command the highest degree of practicality because they are the only materials that guarantee an implant will survive for the remaining life of the patient. Biomedical engineering is largely an optimization problem. It requires trading a degree of biological harmony in exchange for absolute structural integrity. Until we figure out how to grow natural bone faster than it breaks in a car crash, that trade-off remains a non-negotiable law of medicine. The exact material a surgeon or engineer selects is entirely dictated by the physical scale of the biological failure they are trying to fix. This scale categorizes the human body and our medical interventions by exact physical size. Down at the very bottom, at the nanometer level, we find the realm where diseases operate and cellular functions occur. At this depth, targeted polymers and biofunctional molecules dominate. But as you move drastically up the y-axis to the macro tier, the physical forces at play multiply exponentially. At the scale of human organs and skeletal architecture, the required interventions shift entirely to heavy bone fixators, artificial joints, and structural stents. When a patient presents with a shattered load-bearing bone after a severe trauma, time becomes the immediate enemy. We cannot rely on regenerative medicine here. Seeding stem cells onto a polymer scaffold to slowly regrow bone tissue cannot restore structural integrity fast enough to be viable. That patient requires immediate, robust mechanical restoration so they can bear weight, stand up, and reclaim their quality of life. This urgency has redefined the true modern frontier of metallic biomaterials. Science has effectively stopped trying to replace the metal itself. Instead, billions of research dollars are now poured into surface engineering, microscopically manipulating the outer layer of a titanium or cobalt implant so the surrounding tissue is tricked into accepting the rigid metal core. Regenerative medicine will continue to cure diseases and repair soft tissue, but when it comes to the physical, load-bearing architecture of the human body, metals remain its irreplaceable pillars.